Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and of course, one topic we haven't brought up is the anniversary now. We're coming up to the 17th anniversary of Oklahoma City. Now, people need to realize just how bad Oklahoma City was. It was an enabling false flag to allow the Clinton administration to move forward with the first step to make the name Patriot a dirty word in the American lingo. And we now have, of course, this latest enabling act by the usurper-in-chief in the White House and this illegitimate Congress and Senate that have pushed forward a bill now that if you owe money to the IRS, they can not only take away your passport. And you just told me this on the break here. I want you to. I don't want to steal your thunder. What else can they take besides your passport?
This is Tim Alexander, Lord Sterling. I think I kind of blew your mind. Paul Martin, a friend of mine who has an excellent site, and he's on revolutionradio.com. He called me a little while ago to alert me to this. He had posted it on his side, and he said, you might want to post this on your side. And when he was explaining it to me, I kind of went ballistic. This IRS bill, which has passed the Senate, is now going to the House, which will ban your right to travel with a passport overseas if you owe the IRS $50,000. Now, the average person says, well, that's terrible, they can't do that. But I don't owe the IRS $50,000, okay? Well, the mainstream media just kind of overlooked a couple things about it. First off, it's not if you owe them, it's if some bureaucrat in the IRS or someone in the government claims you owe them $50,000 or more. Okay, it's just the first step. They'll waive that $50,000. It's getting the camel's toe under the tent. And all communism and fascist governments, right away, they have to restrict your ability to leave the country. Okay, the problem in America has always been keeping people out, not keeping people in. But now it's going to be. But this isn't the big thing. Buried in the legislation is their right on an allegation, and it's unconstitutional even if it wasn't, but their right to confiscate your guns. So the IRS can now, the government can now selectively says, well, Dr. Deagle, he says stuff on air that we don't like. He actually tells the truth, and we can't have that. So we think that he owes us $10 gazillion. And Dr. Deagle says, well, I'm sorry, I've never made $10 gazillion in my entire life. They said, well, sometime down the road we'll have a administrative hearing maybe, but in the meantime, you can't travel. And by the way, there's 50 armed men outside your door ready to kick it down to confiscate your guns.
Yeah, no.
And your friends and people, by the way, people that have been on this side, your side, my side, people that have exhibited any intelligence or patriotism for their country. We're not talking about criminals. We're not talking about some radicals. We're talking about people that maybe have gone to Rense.com or WhatReallyHappened.com or Europe or Dr. Deagle's sites or one of dozens of others. They're on a list. And coincidentally, they all owe us money, and our troops will be there to confiscate your guns. And by the way...
Now, one of the things that they're doing, though, people need to grasp this, and I mentioned this on Rinse when I was... Every Tuesday, I kind of do a show, just to kind of, I call multiple updates on Rinse, and I try to expand that here on the Nutrimedical Report, Clay and Iron Show. I personally think that unless we have, if we have full bellies, there's no such thing as martial law going to happen. Martial law is smart meters on your home. It is biometric currency because they collapsed the damn dollar, and now they don't even print money. They don't even want to give you a check. It has to be electronic funds transfer. That's martial law. They can pass all the laws they want to try to get our guns, let's put it this way. If they come to my house to gather my guns, they need to bring on a few extra body bags, not only for my body, but for theirs. And yes, there may be 50-yard men outside, but some of those men aren't going back to their sweet little wives and families. They're going to die trying to take me down. And
I can tell you the famous quote from a movie, at Clusters, it was a massacre of some Indians, and the chief left his teepee, and he said, "It is a good day to die." And you have to be prepared to defend yourself. And I am not going to a gulag.
Well, let's put it this way. And I have this from my friends because I work with Special Forces in Delta. And I remember back in 1999 when I spoke in Norfolk, Virginia, and we had about maybe 400 and some people in the audience, really packed in. I traveled to 42 cities in Israel with the Prophecy Club. And I worked with Special Forces in Delta before and after that. And one of the things that we had with these agents around me is they said, if anything happens to you, Deagle, we're everywhere. We're in the Secret Service that are actually protecting the president. We're around the congressmen and senators. We're in ex-presidents. We're the guys. And a lot of these people are not the bad guys that got involved with sexual mischievousness down in this recent conference down in Colombia. No, they're good guys. In fact, what's going on is if something happens to people like Deagle or Alex Jones or Tim Alexander or Jeff Rance or any other patriot that has had a voice out there that's just trying to ask questions and demand the U.S. Constitution be honored as a document that declares that man's rights don't come from the government but come from our Creator. If something happens, the violence by which it'll immediately respond against these individuals in their high positions, including corporate executives, will be so immediate they can't imagine how fast it'll respond. It'll be quicker than an incoming ICBM from the Soviet Union.
Well, I have a feeling the time is getting close. The American public needs to grow some additional brain cells and some gonads.
Some of your titanium variety?
Something, because I'll tell you what, the history, if history is any example or anytime a national public allows communism, fascism, police state to grow and grow and grow, they always pay a price, and it is a horrific, terrible price. And this is happening now. I used to be the Scottish editor at Burke's Peerage in London, and I've been interviewed by all and dealt many times with all the London newspapers, the major papers. One of them is called The Guardian.
Right.
And they're a broadsheet. They're not one of the rags that print all kind of junk. They have a article, Dateline today. It says the TSA's mission creep is making the U.S. a police state. And they have a photo here of this latest little fascism down in Houston, where on city buses, TSA came in with their submachine guns and their dogs, and on a city bus, the TSA had raids and people sitting on a city bus. I have a car. Most people have cars, but a lot of cities, people take urban transportation. And these clowns come on with submachine guns and dogs to get in your face because of, quote, terrorism.
Maybe they thought it was a movie set and actually wasn't real people.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Back in a moment. Welcome back, and
you got to continue this conversation on air, Dr. Bell.
Yeah, I want to continue this. I want to start roll it back a bit. Firstly, a lot of people are saying, when will these things happen? Of course, the first thing you want to do is read your Bible. We've had an interesting prophetic discussion earlier today with John McTiernan. And his book is As Is America Has Done to Israel. It's a very interesting book. We also are going to bring on an author, Damien Author, believe it or not, is his name. And each of them brings out different aspects of this thing, and I think the most important thing is not necessarily to tell you all the answers, but to ask better questions, and then go back to your Bible and use the brain that God gave you. But what we see happening right now is we see a world hurtling toward economic chaos, a war that doesn't even make sense financially or otherwise. We see a world scrambling to get control of the population and moving toward a biometric world currency we would prophesied in the Bible as the mark of the beast, which is coming very quickly. And what I think is going to propel it, which is propelling the globalists to build underground cities and off-world space platforms, is the galactic and solar changes. Now, every 62 million years, roughly, there is a move of the Orion arm of the galaxy through the northern side of the plane. Now, if you look at all the ancient prophecies, they talk about 2012, we're moving from what's called linear time to nonlinear. Now, I'll give you a thought experiment like Einstein. If you headed out from space on a rocket, and let's say the rocket wasn't limited by the speed of light, but you can go 1 billion times faster than the speed of light, and you're traveling out into space just straight out, you'd actually come right back to the originating point, because time-space in the cosmos is actually curved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happens is the torsion field, if you want to call it, is curved time-space. And so in the center of the galaxy, every galaxy, 2.5% of the mass of every galaxy is a black hole. And the mass actually emerges again as stars and planets, etc., and planetoids and asteroids from those black holes. In fact, there's no such thing as a Big Bang. This is another big stupid theory that they have. The universe is constantly creating and being recreated by the Creator God, and that, in fact, the torsion field existed before the mass of the star even came together. You don't have an agglomerated dust cloud in space that suddenly, all of a sudden, kind of pulls together with a gravitational field and becomes a star. What God does is actually you have a creation of a torsion field that creates the matter that literally seems to emerge from nothing, but it doesn't. It emerges from the torsion field. And, of course, it's governed by the higher dimensional planes that God creates. Now, why is this important? Well, as we pass through December 21st, and this is an astronomical fact, we're moving, and have been moving for 15 years, into the transition point from one torsion field construct into a different torsion field construct. In other words, space, as Einstein says, has structure. It has substance. In other words, it's not just emptiness. So the flux lines of the Higgs bosons, the gravitons, the structure of flux lines that regulate plasma in stars and in the Earth's magma actually change structure. And when that happens, what it does is it's like the Earth and the Sun and all the objects in our solar system, the Orion arm of the galaxy, change gears. It's almost like all the gears switch. And when that happens, it changes the rivers of magma that move the Earth. It can cause a tremendous torsional force that can disjunction between the lithosphere, or the crust of the Earth, and the mantle. And of course,
well, you're certainly beginning to see that.
Right, and what happened is, now I'll explain a little story, because I know this. I had Q-level clearance in Space Command, and one of the first things they told me was that in the 50s and early 60s, they actually developed what's called torsion field satellite imaging, which means they could actually look through the Earth and see deeply into the structure of the Earth, and they saw all these pockmarks, and it didn't make sense to them. I said, what are these? They're giant cavities, anywhere between 4 and 12 cubic miles inside, and there were no signs underneath the Earth of feeders for a volcano. And when they did their research, because they tried to go even explorations to these areas, what they discovered is that these are ancient volcanic magma domes where the crust of the Earth has moved thousands of miles, and there's no longer a feeder through the mantle of the Earth like an artery pumping up hot magma to create a volcano. Now, why is this important? It's because when we remember the Himalaya mountains, they were not created over millions of years of gradual impact between the Asian and the Indian plates. No. They were created in a matter of months by a giant continental drift created by these torsional forces that it caused a disjunction of the lithosphere, like the breakup of the ancient continent of Pangaea millions of years ago. And it was during one of these transitional periods when the Earth was passing through the galactic plane, where the lithosphere literally separated. It's almost like taking a candied apple and boiling it over a hot flame, and the skin sort of slides off the apple, right? And that's what's happening. The Earth is a nuclear reactor. That's why it hasn't cooled in 1.5 billion years. Instead of 5 billion, it's still hot because
it is magma, a nuclear reactor. That is correct.
It's a nuclear reactor. And so what we have to realize is that we're going to have major solar storms. Even when we look at all these prophecies, and we look just even at the Christian ones, not necessarily about the Mayan and the Hopi and Nostradamus and all the other foolishness and the I Ching and all these other people that are, quote, remote viewers. If we just stick to the Christian, there's going to be strange signs in the heavens. Well, the alignment was just like the cross of Henday. If you look at the alignment of the Mayan hoop and so on, if you look at the lineup of Ophiuchus, which is one of the signs of the zodiac, what you have is the center of the Earth, the center of the Sun, and the center of the black hole, the center of the galaxy line up along the galactic plane on December 21st. So after that, you have a change in the gear structure of space-time. Space-time changes structure. So you go from lineal time to nonlinear time, to circular time. And the reason what we say circular is because it becomes evident to you, although you appear to be going along a timeline that's straight out, like a rocket heading into space millions of times faster than the speed of light, you're actually constantly curving until you're back at the origin. And so what that means...
Almost like eternity, but not really.
Yeah, not really, yeah. It's finite, but it's very big. And so what happens is 62 million years appears to be... And so all these cycles, whether it's the Milankovitch cycle, which is a 105,000-year ASH cycle, the cycle that's the precession of the equinox, where we go from pointing the axis of the Earth toward... the North Star or toward Vega, which switches back and forth. All of these cycles are all culminating, guess when? Now. Now, people need to get it. And when we say this, we're not just saying to scare you. We want you to repent. And it's not repenting to say, why is repenting going to save me? Well, first off, if you don't have a relationship with the Most High God, if you don't have a clear scientific mind, you can't even come up with either spiritual or scientific answers to deal with the reality that the globalists know that we're about to go through global cataclysms, and they're preparing their way to survive by digging underground cities, which is, by the way, in prophecy, Revelation 6, it says, they shall Deagle themselves in the deep places of the earth to hide from the face of the Holy One.
But it won't work.
It won't work. Now, the fact is, after that, we're going to see megaquakes. Now, we're talking about, and I'm going to just give you an explanation, not necessarily prophetic, but I'm just going to give you an explanation.
By the way, let me tell you this quote.
Let me finish this one thing, though. Let me finish this one thing. Imagine a time, and I'm not going to give a date, after 2012, let's say maybe it's 2017, but maybe it's 2022, but let's say we have a time when all of a sudden there's a disjunction between the lithosphere and the magma, because we've now moved through this torsion field, and now the continent of North America moves at 1.6 miles an hour, which is the speed of a 65-year-old grandmother going shopping. But she does it for 2 months, and she walks south. Okay? That could be the speed at which the continent moves. Back in a moment. Welcome back. To complete that thought, we have much more discussion and response from Tim. That grandmother going at 1.6 miles an hour is a very poignant fact, because this is what formed the Himalaya Mountains. This is what formed the great divides of the continents millions of years ago, and they occurred exactly with the same galactic and solar events that we talked about with Cody Jones from the LaRouche Foundation basement team that's presenting a major paper this last couple of weeks in Washington, D.C. to National Geographic. People need a grasp. We're there again. That linear time is now becoming nonlinear, and all these nuclear reactors, like 75% in America, sitting near fault lines. Fukushima Daiichi, 500% increase in earthquakes since March 11th last year. We're not talking about it not only being built in an earthquake center. Since the Sendai earthquake and tsunami, there have been a 500% chance. And there's a 100% chance in 5 months to 6 months from now that a level 7 quake will strike Sendai and bring down MOX Reactor 4, increasing the level of plutonium radiation equivalent to World War III on the entire planet. That's a fact.
Yeah, they actually have more, Chris, you'll have to correct me on this, more celsium stored there than in all 800 atomic warhead explosions, as most, of course, have been tested, all but 2, Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Well, if you just calculated out the amount necessary to make a plutonium warhead at the MOX reactor cooling pool 4 only. We're not even talking about 1, 2, and 3. 3, we think actually had a hydrogen-generated hydrothermic nuclear explosion and blew the entire reactor core literally hundreds of miles away, and then it's gone. It's so radioactive there, people can't even get to that 100-foot high debris pile on the top of the reactor, because the reactor core is like a shotgun shot straight up in the air. And reactor 4 has so much MOX plutonium in it, it could make 97,000 plus nuclear bombs.
See, those figures are so insane, and why they would have plutonium.
I'll tell you why, because they were making nuclear weapons illegally.
Well, you're right.
And all right back to Ronald Reagan.
Japan has had nukes for years.
Right, Ronald Reagan and George W.
I want to get this out before we go on. This is a quote that I got on a comment section of some article I linked, and it is really good. We live in a time when to be an alarmist is to be a realist.
That's a very, very salient statement. And, of course, we see it in a time when Iran is arresting more and more Israeli, operatives inside the state of Iran.
They're getting better at counterintelligence.
And you mentioned a comment we were talking the other day off air that now that Israel is enraged over the fact that Iran is saying, hey, well, maybe it's actually in this meeting in Turkey, it's anti-Islamic to build nuclear bombs. And the rest of the people say, well, what? What do you mean? I thought you wanted to build nuclear bombs. And the Iranians are saying, no, it's not Islamic. I'm thinking, oh, my gosh. We have an Islamic country.
They don't need a nuclear weapon to take out Israel. They have,
right, but exactly. But the point is,
they have everything they need to destroy Israel, and it's in place. And that is partially what this is all about in the Middle East. But what from the Israeli perspective, Israel wants no checks, no trump cards against them. They want to dominate the entire Middle East. And
they're already trumped. The fact is that the real reality has to set into Lieberman and Netanyahu, as they call him in Israel, that they're already trumped. The only thing that will
set in with him. He's from Satan. He's totally evil. His solution to everything is war, death, and destruction, and he's a very bad individual. But they've got 60,000 to 100,000 or more rockets and guided missiles with fuel, air, explosive, radiological warheads, chemical warheads, advanced biological warheads. They can flatten Israel, and most of the Israeli population in the Tel Aviv, Jerusalem area is concentrated there, and they could literally devastate Israel, and they can do it in 1 hour's time. And that is literally a mutually assured destruction. Of course, Israel can destroy them, but that's a classic MAD. And when you have a MAD, you don't go to war with the other guy unless you want to die. But Netanyahu and his nuts want to. So that tells you that they're Satanist by the very definition. But,
I got a new job for Netanyahu after the elections. Is we need to give him a bottle of spray shine, and he and Lieberman can go down in the underground silos and polish the nukes and keep them there. That's where they're actually
just keep heading further south and go right to hell.
Well, yeah, exactly. But the point is that they actually are a deterrent when they're there, because the Muslims aren't nuts enough to shoot it, because every Muslim nation and city and town within thousands of miles, 5,000 miles of Israel, will be vaporized and turned into obsidian glass, with every person turned into a shadow by Israel.
But when they attack, if Israel actually does attack, or we attack and take out Bashir and kill most of their population, they're not going to sit still for it. That's when you trigger the MAD.
Exactly,
and they're not going to trigger it, but Netanyahu probably is, because he's just that type of person. And that's when you get to the point where you have to say, this is beyond crazy. This is a spiritual dimension that we're in.
Yeah, it's exactly. So, Chris, I'd like you to give an update as to what's going on now in not only Fukushima, which is we now have Senator Wyden, actually, who's now got YouTube video clips up. But things are getting more crazy by the minute at how dangerous this is and how we're already being bathed with lots of radiation. We're now discovering, as you mentioned, fish in the Pacific Ocean that are just laced with heavy metal radioisotopes. And now we have got a situation where if the MOX reactor pool goes, it's not only going to cause a mass evacuation of the largest metropolitan area on Earth of Greater Tokyo, but it's also going to kill a lot of people, and it's going to salt radioisotopes across the Pacific Ocean to the northern hemisphere. And you're not safe in the south, by the way, either. It'll eventually get to you. It might take 6 to 18 months, but you're going to get more radioactive than you are already in New Zealand and Australia. The danger is that this is already affecting in utero. They now are saying that 28 out of 100 pregnancies in northern Japan are now resulting in spontaneous abortion and miscarriage. 4% plus of children have got brain damage caused by the radiation there, and they're sending children back to these little prefectures right beside Fukushima. So, Chris, what's the latest update on what's going on there? And then the insanity of the NRC and what they're doing, which is to increase nuclear safety, and the fact that we are now seeing increased earthquakes everywhere, including now a warning that something's going to happen at New Madrid real soon.
You know, let me try to organize our thoughts here. All right, first of all, we know that Unit 3, they sent that is Fukushima Unit 3, was sent in a robot, and they found that the containment hatch was broken. It's one of the containment hatches. These hatches are supposed to withstand anything that it's designed for, and it's broken to the point where there was evidence of leaking water coming out of it, and there still is leaking water. What does that mean? Well, it's a housing that surrounds the reactor. And if this is broken, we already know that the reactor is broken. That's where all the fuel is. Well, the fuel's all splattered all over the floor, and that's the containment. Therefore, just as we conjectured a long time ago, the containment broke. And absolutely, this is evidence that the containment broke in this one location and most likely other locations that haven't been detected yet, with physical and visible evidence. So that's a pretty important article that came out, and I sent that to you. Also, another robot was sent into Unit 2, and see, we're getting a little bit of disinformation out of TEPCO. I'm saying a little bit in quotation.
Oh, it's like a little heat in hell, right?
You better.
That's a good one.
Where they send pictures and all, very nice pictures of where they sent this robot, and they say that high radiation was found, but no leaks. Well, you know what?
No leaks. That's amazing.
I got news for you. There are leaks. They're just not looking in the right place. I wouldn't expect a leak for that. That's not inside containment. And I see the photos, and I know exactly where they are. And it's not the leak.
Let's repeat that when we come back and more. And we're live with Chris Harris and Tim Alexander. Chris, the situation, please continue and see if we can summarize it. And we also want to touch on what's going on in North America, because the NRC are really slow to respond. I just read the latest reports here from San Onofre, and all the regulatory agencies are late in their reports. None of them wants to admit it exactly, that in fact what happened is that the station Blackout caused a hot reactor shutdown. They had defects in the tubes that they put in, and that's why they had massive and very rapid deterioration in the function of these tubes. Some of them were talking for a while there about blocking off the tubes and reactivating the steam-powered generating turbines, and in fact that would release massive amounts of radiation if the thing was not completely sealed off. So thank God, that Daryl Issa is our representative here, and he lives in Vista, California, where I live, probably no more than a mile from me, and in fact said, no, bad idea. I don't think we're going to set this reactor back up again. So, we have these problems all over the country, and we haven't even hit into what I call earthquake central, which is after December of this year. Earthquakes are going to increase this year, but after 2012, it's going to be hot time in the old town. It's going to get real, real crazy. And we're not preparing for station blackouts, and we're not preparing for extreme weather. We're not preparing for armies of tornadoes marching across the Midwest. We're not prepared for tsunamis and the New Madrid Fault. We're not prepared for anything, to be honest with you. So tell us more.
We know that we're not prepared for anything. And remember, a long time ago, I said the reason why they want to control the news and they don't want the real news to get out is because nobody has the real answer. You know, at this point, all the king's horses and all the king's men, they really didn't know how to do this. They didn't know how to put it back together. There's no way to do it. And I said they're frightened because of what the ramifications are. And you know, I can understand their fear because it's really, we're in unknown grounds with Fukushima.
Well, I'll tell you what the real problem is. And the fact is, I know that we have radiation-resistant robots. In fact, they just gave one here from America to Japan, and that's one of the robots they're going to try to send into the reactor pool number 3 to have a look at that, to see what's going on. The fact is that they should have put a tent around it, not just put a little cladding building around them a year ago. They didn't. They were trying to send human beings into an area that's so high radiation, even if you're suicidal, within minutes you'd be a blithering, drooling idiot. The fact is you can't send human beings in there. You can only send in robots that are radiation resistant and operated remotely. You have to put a tent over it, and all the classified research, which is sequestered in not only America and DARPA and Russia and other countries, none of these countries came together as a consortium of scientists to say, let's pool all our resources and all our Blackout projects and put something together to stop this mess because it's going to poison every one of our countries. They're going to detect it in Russia just as much as they're going to detect it in Ontario, Canada, or in Des Moines, Iowa.
What's the old saying from World War II, and I'll give you the clean version of it, situation normal, all filed up.
Exactly. I think it's a little nastier than that, but that's the point. So
that's the trouble when you deal with governments.
Well, it's not just governments, people. You see, what I want to do is call out to people to embarrass them the fact that whether you're a Russian or a Canadian or a European or a South African or you're an Aussie, if we don't come together on this as a global world project to stop what's going on in Fukushima and Reactor 4 hits the dirt, I can't tell you how much devastation it'll be, but I can tell you northern Japan is finished. I can tell you the Pacific Ocean is dying. That's why I call it the plutonium sea. People need to understand that this is not a minor thing, and as it bioaccumulates, cesium, strontium, and these longer-acting isotopes, we're going to have big problems. We're talking about...
Dr. Bill, that's right out of the Bible, because the Bible says the waters will be made bitter. And if you understand bitter from a Chernobyl, which translates into bitter wood and wormwood, then literally the waters are being made bitter, as in Chernobyl. In other words, they're being made radioactive. And this is literally right out of the last book of the Bible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, Chris, tell us more about what's happening here in North America. Are they doing anything to move, to better technology, to better backup power, to more safer nuclear reactor designs? What's happening with the NRC? Are they here, for example, in San Onofre? They're doing nothing. They're not even on time with their reports. What the heck's going on? At least they haven't shut it back on again. But thank God.
I wouldn't expect San Onofre to come back until the absolute root cause of the problem. And let's put it this way: if it is started and the root cause is not to my liking, I'm going to say something. And so
well, let me tell you what I do, okay? And people need to understand this. We need to use our scientific mind and our spiritual mind, and you have both. You pray, you ask God to give you inspiration, just like, scientists to get inspiration from God. So I prayed on this for months, and the answer I got from God was that the hot shutdown was caused by the thing they don't want to tell you, that a few keystrokes in Yuma, Arizona blew the grid, and a series of domino things caused a hot shutdown that burned those tubes out because they had a defective design. That's what I got in prayer. And all the evidence, including what you told me this morning before the show, says that that's correct. And they know it, but they don't want to come out and say we had a bad defective design. We don't have redundancy in our power grid. If we ever had a major superquake along the San Andreas Fault, because the extension fault line just a few hundred miles away, that was a loud earthquake a couple weeks ago. I mean, it woke me up at midnight. It was like bang. I thought a truck was coming right through one end of the house to the other, and it shook me out of my bed. Okay? Yep. So you have to understand what's coming is ugly. When it's 300 to 400 miles away and it wakes you out of your bed at midnight, this is not going to be funny when that San Andreas Fault gives and there's no water coming across that conduit and there's no electricity because all the power lines are cut from Yuma, Arizona coming over, because most of our power comes across from Arizona to Southern California.
Yep. Now you had asked, also asked we're doing as far as what the NRC is trying to do. It's funny because you should ask that this week. There were 3 or 4 different announcements brought out that they're going to start using or implementing the rules of the near-term task force that we discussed many times on your program. And the first announcement is for a meeting coming up soon. I sent you the announcements. They're going to discuss the station blackout rules, and they're going to find out how to make them better. Station blackout means if you have no electrical power, what do you do? And it means that there's going to have to be expensive retrofits to these plants. It has to be. If it's anything less than that, it's not going to work. And you and I have discussed many times on here what we need to do. That would be more diesel generators with diverse power sources and diverse fuel sources, and not located too centrally at one spot in case there's damage to one spot. This is not going to be cheap. So if the bean counters have their way, they'll find a way to skirt out of that. But if the real plant guys who know what's going on, they have their say, then it will be done right. Also,
but not being cheap, heck, how much is Fukushima costing Japan and the world?
Yeah, well, the costs are, you have to realize how many fetal defects, how many senior citizens dying prematurely of Alzheimer's disease, strokes, and heart attacks, because it's not just going to cause cancer, it's going to cause every illness. As I said, like the movie Tron, it's de-resing the world. And you have some top stories I want you to mention just before we go, because we should do a kind of an update on our live stream channel afterward, Tim. Some of these stories are so shocking you just can't believe, but hit the high headlines there. For example, Obama ready to yield Iran's nuclear transparency, and people don't understand that they're just itching to start a war, even though there's no sense in it, none.
Well, it's not just that there's no sense to it; it's every bit of logic and rational human thought is lined up against starting the war.
Right.
I mean, it's like on one side, there's every bit of human intelligence on Earth says don't do it. On the other side, well, what is on the other side? Lucifer?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And yet, that's where they want to go, you know.
Yeah, and of course, we have to realize that, one of my favorite shows on TV now is Doomsday Preppers. It'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, it'll make you think, it'll make you say, lose control of bowel and bladder.
Well, but yet, we have all these power plants, and as Chris was just talking about, okay, the bean counters are opposed to doing this, but the weakness is the power that's required to keep the water flowing, to keep the things from going critical. And they only have so much backup power, so many generators, and, a really bad earthquake might take them out, but assuming it doesn't, there's only so much diesel fuel. Well, what if your bridges are out? How are you going to get diesel fuel to those generators? And I got to tell you, generators will only last, a couple months or so, and then they're going to conk out.
Not only that, how are you going to get the helicopters in to get the fuel in to even keep the generators going? And what if your manufacturing plants are down so you can't make the step-down transformers for the power grid that's been fried?
Then you have multiple Fukushimas all over.
Yeah. As I say, American Fukushima is coming because of lack of planning and honesty to the public. Chris, closing comments.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I thank you very much for certainly illustrating how vulnerable the grid is and how much infrastructure. So
amazing. Right after the show, we're going to do an update with Tim in about 15 minutes on our live stream channel. Tune in, and we'll do an update on all of this news and more. Back in a few minutes.